This is the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So the question that keeps coming up is, are these differences actually noticeable in real-world usage scenarios? Which is what I like talking about. And is the extra money that you're going to be spending for the 15 Pro Max actually going to be worth it, or are you just wasting your money? And which one should you get this year? Let's get into it. Okay, let's first talk about design. On paper, the design differences between the two phones isn't that big, but in actual real-world usage, this was one of the areas that actually stood out to me personally. So the 15 Pro Max is actually supposed to be about 8% lighter this year, but to me personally, the difference feels much more substantial. The phone actually feels quite a bit lighter in your hand. Now, I don't know if this is only because of the titanium bezel and the weight difference, but I feel like maybe there might be some changes done internally as well to make the phone feel more balanced, because overall usability just feels quite a bit better in your hands. So if the Pro Max size always seemed a little daunting or heavy to you, then the 15 Pro Max might be an easier pill to swallow. Furthermore, the 15 Pro Max has some subtle curvatures on the sides, making the phone feel a little less boxy and sharp compared to the 14 Pro Max. I felt like the 14 Pro Max actually dug into my palm a little bit more compared to the 15 Pro Max. The bezels are also slightly thinner on the 15 Pro Max compared to the 14 Pro Max, and if you put them side to side, it is actually noticeable. However, in actual real-world usage and practice, it's not something that you're going to fret over, know, or even feel. Now, other than this, the new 15 Pro Max is also slightly narrower and shorter compared to the 14 Pro Max, which again helps with the whole weight, look, and feel of the device in day-to-day usage. The display is always a big deal for me, and the good news is both of these have the exact same display, so whether you're going with the 14 or the 15, you're not really going to be missing out on anything. Okay, so that's design. Now let's talk about durability. Now this is a big one if you've been paying attention to the news lately. The thing is, this is the first year that Apple is actually using these newer materials to build this phone, and naturally there are going to be some learning to be done here. The 15 Pro Max has had some durability issues out of the gate, with many of them breaking a lot faster than the 14 Pro Max. However, the silver lining here is that it is supposed to be much cheaper to replace the glass on the 15 Pros versus the 14s. Now, there's been a lot of commotion online about the new 15 Pros overheating. However, look, I can't speak for others, but I'll give you my experience, and I personally have not had any overheating issues with my new 15 Pro Max, and I've been using this thing quite some time, and I've been putting it through the ringer for all of my reviews, and honestly, it's nothing different compared to what I've had with the 14. Like, even the 14 Pro Max used to heat up for me when I used to charge and whatnot, so I mean, it's not that big of a difference. Next, let's talk about battery life. Now, this is a big one for me, because on the 14 Pro Max, the battery life has been surprisingly bad for me, and it's just been getting worse and worse over the year. So much so that even when I upgraded from the 14 Pro to the 14 Pro Max, I was still struggling to get through the full day without having to top up at some point during the day. So I was praying that the 15 Pro Max would be better. But before we get into that, I quickly want to share something about myself. Now, a lot of people may not know, but I'm actually a chartered accountant by trade. And the thing is, I went to years and years of school, paid a lot of money just to be able to learn and practice that trade. But take my YouTube journey, for example. I literally learned how to pick up a camera, what settings to play with, and how to edit video all online. And after doing it part-time for a few years, I was now able to quit my 9-to-5 and do what I love full-time. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare, comes in. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members who come together to take the next step in their creative and learning journey. Skillshare has everything you would need in order to learn how to start a side hustle or turn your passion into a paycheck like I did. And speaking of which, one of the classes that I'm actually personally interested in right now is called Notion for YouTube Creators: Easily Manage Your Creative Projects by Asante Bean. Notion has become my second brain right now, and exploring this class really helps in organizing it better. So if you're interested in joining me and getting started on your learning journey, then be one of the first 500 people to use my link in the description down below, and you will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So don't miss out, click that link ASAP. Okay, so battery life. Now with the 15 Pro Max, the good news is that it has been better for me. I'm able to get through the day a little bit farther, but the bad news is not by much. I still end up having to charge the phone during the evening if I've had some heavy usage days. For example, if I'm filming a lot, or let's say I'm using the phone quite a bit that day, which is not ideal. And the question does come up in my mind is this slight improvement that I'm seeing between the 14 Pro and the 15 Pro only because the phone is brand new versus my 14 Pro Max is a year old now? Because these batteries do degrade quite a bit over time. Okay, next let's talk about USB-C. Now this is definitely a big one as well. And who would have thought that in 2023 a port would be a major differentiating factor, but hey, here we are. So this makes a big difference for me personally. Not only because all other devices that I use have USB-C, which allows me to get rid of that awful lightning cable altogether, making life so much easier. But the bigger reason why this port matters to me personally is that you can do so much more with it now. The 15 Pro Max USB-C port is USB 3.2 Gen 2, so it has speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second, which will allow you to transfer media between your phone and computer so much faster. Not to mention, this port now also allows you to plug in SSDs or memory cards and record directly into them. In fact, you get more filmmaking options and video options by doing so. Now, speaking of filmmaking, let's talk about the camera updates. Now, let's be honest, the camera updates are not a huge difference or a deal breaker by any means, but there are a few notable changes, such as the 5x telephoto lens. Even though the 14 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max have pretty much identical sensors for the most part, you can now shoot in 24 megapixel mode on the 15 Pro Max in addition to the 12 megapixel mode, whereas the 14 Pro Max only had the 12 megapixel mode. Now, is this actually going to make a difference? Let's find out. Okay, so in order to test this out, basically what we're going to do is we're going to take photos with the 24 megapixel and the 12 megapixel, and let's see if there is actually a noticeable difference. You can see the amount of detail that we are actually getting. You can see the individual blinds here versus on the 14 Pro Max, you can see how that's just gotten distorted. The 15 Pro Max with the 24 megapixel holds up better. Next, I want to showcase basically how it looks to have a 3x zoom versus a 5x zoom, so you can get an idea for it without me just telling you. This is a 3x zoom of my playground, and this is a 5x zoom of my playground. That's basically the difference in zoom, and as you can see, that is actually pretty substantial. I also think that this lens just looks much cleaner than the 3x lens. And also, I just max zoomed both of these, and as you can tell, with the 15 Pro Max, you can zoom in a little bit more than the 14 Pro Max, obviously, because we're already 5x zoomed on this one. Something just magical about these 5x portraits, okay? So let me show you what this kind of looks like. Here's a shot of the portrait mode on both the 15 Pro Max. You can see the amount of compression around this camera, and the bokeh just looks so much more beautiful versus on this. It's nice as well, but the 3x, I mean, you can still see quite a bit of the background. It's just not the same. Whereas this looks like it came out of like a mirrorless camera. Also, another huge thing for me has been log support. Now, initially going into this, I thought it might have just been a gimmick, but I can't tell you how big of a game changer this has been for me. So the entire day I was at that Google event that I had mentioned, I literally spent that whole day filming in log on the iPhone, and honestly, so many people were shocked to hear that this was just shot on an iPhone. The highlight roll-off is just incredible, and it makes the footage look much less phony. Get it? Like phone-y? Okay. Now, one thing to note though is that up until the 15 Pro Max switches to the 5x lens, it pretty much is using optical zoom all the way up till 4.9x, whereas the 14 Pro Max, you are using the 3x telephoto, which should theoretically give you a better quality image. So this is at 4.9x on both of these phones, and right off the bat, I can tell you, even without zooming in, the one on the 14 Pro Max looks cleaner. This is the 14 Pro Max with the 4.9x zoom, and this is the 15 Pro Max with the 4.9x zoom. As you can see, you can't even read what's in that window, versus with this, yes you can. And then also I'm just gonna do a max zoom, all the way zoomed in on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. We can go a little bit more on the 15 Pro Max because we do have that bigger zoom lens. Now, I max zoomed both of these phones, how much closer you're able to get with the 15 Pro Max, so much so that you can actually read what it says in the window. Pretty cool. versus on the 14 Pro Max, yeah, there's no way you're gonna be able to read that. Okay, next let's talk about the action button. My expectations with it have been a little bit simmered. So this new addition is both great, but also not something that will make me sway my decision between the two. Look, I loved the mute switch that was on the iPhone 14 Pro Max and pretty much every year before that, because even if the iPhone was in my pocket, then I'd be able to reach down quickly and check if the phone was silent or not without having to pull it out and take a look at it. And even now with the action button, for the longest time I had it functioning as the mute switch as well, until recently I started playing around with it a little bit and I remapped the whole thing to a shortcut which would allow me to choose between several different quick options that I personally use quite a bit. So when I would press the action button, it would pull up this menu which would allow me to toggle mute, do not disturb, or even interact with my Tesla. But here's my actual experience with it so far. I was still pretty much using it for that same purpose, which is to mute my phone. But now it also got extra annoying because I added an extra layer to the whole process. Plus on top of that, I had to actually look at the screen. Too much of a hassle. So at the end of the day, now I've ended up just going back to the mute switch again. So in my opinion, this isn't something that's going to sway people one way or the other. The only other best option I can see for it is to mapping it to camera, but yeah. Okay, next up, let's talk about performance. Look, I would love to run benchmarks for you and yada yada, but at the end of the day, I'm much more interested in actual real world usage. And to be honest, I personally haven't felt any difference in the actual usage of these phones. And using these phones in day-to-day usage, the 14 Pro Max itself was plenty fast, especially coupled with that 120Hz ProMotion display. Honestly, it's very hard to even nitpick any differences here. Now, where there can potentially be a difference is gaming, and I personally haven't tested this yet. I might make a video on this down the road, so make sure you guys are subbed for it, but the graphical performance of the new A17 chip is going to be better, which will allow for a smoother gaming experience. And we already have games like Assassin's Creed and AAA level games that are coming out to the iPhone soon, so having that 15 Pro Max in this regard will probably make a difference. So if you're into gaming, then you know which one to get. Okay, so let's bring this all in together and make a conclusion here. So if you wanted to actually pick up the 14 Pro Max, by now you could probably get it several $100 cheaper on the market, especially if you go to third-party markets. And if you're still thinking about the 15 Pro Max, the question at the end of the day is, are these upgrades big enough for you? The way I see it, if you're somebody who uses your phone a lot for camera-related work, then the differences, in my opinion, are justified to go with the 15 Pro Max, especially with log and 4K 60 and USB-C and external recording to SSDs and stuff. These things will add up over time and literally benefit your life every single day. So in my opinion, that becomes worth it. Which is why for me, this upgrade has been quite beneficial. However, if you don't use your camera for content creation and all these pro features like log and 4K 60 or recording on SSDs and stuff aren't something that you really care about, then it might just be better for you to save your money and go with the 14 Pro Max, as the upgrades other than those features aren't really that substantial enough to warrant spending $300 to $500 more, in my opinion. But yeah, overall, I personally am very happy with the upgrade, and I'm glad I went with the 15 Pro Max, as a lot of the new changes have been welcome additions for me that have actually improved the quality of my life day to day.